There's something about being alone in the wilderness that resets your brain. The silence, the stillness, it's like stepping out of the world and into something older, wilder. You stop worrying about emails, grocery lists, social media noise. That's why I started solo backpacking. It gave me peace that nothing else could. Last October, I took a trip to Yosemite, just before the seasonal closures. I wanted one last adventure before the snow locked the park down. I had a specific route planned, 5 days through remote sections of the high country. I expected blisters, sore shoulders, maybe some lonely nights. I didn't expect what happened at that last campsite. I didn't expect to come back changed. It was my third day in. I'd hiked longer than I planned, over 17 miles, and was drained. According to my topographic map, there was a small clearing near the edge of a ravine. No designated site, no nearby foot traffic. Exactly what I wanted. When I got there, it was perfect, secluded. The canopy opened just enough to let the sun paint everything in golden light. The earth was soft but dry, no animal droppings, no boot prints, just pine needles and silence. But the moment I stepped into that clearing, something shifted. The air felt heavier, still. I paused. I actually stopped and looked around, thinking, why does this feel so off? I told myself it was just fatigue, but somewhere deep down, it felt like the trees were watching me. I shook it off and got to work. Set up my tent near the rock wall for shelter, gathered deadfall for a small campfire, boiled some water for freeze-dried stew. I kept my journal open as I worked, a habit of mine, sketching little maps, noting landmarks, weather patterns. The sun dipped behind the treetops, shadows reached across the clearing like fingers. And then, everything went still. No wind, no rustling, not even the usual hoot of an owl or flutter of wings. I remember stopping mid-bite and realizing I could hear nothing. And it was that kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt like something was holding its breath. I crawled into my tent around 9, listened to a podcast until I started to drift. Sometime after midnight, I woke up suddenly, not because of a sound, because of a lack of one. I lay there barely breathing, then a snap, a twig breaking, not close but not far. Then silence again, and then I heard it, a whisper, clear, deliberate. It said my name. Elise. I froze. I thought I was dreaming, but I was wide awake, then again from another angle, closer. Elise. It wasn't wind. It wasn't imagination. I reached for my flashlight with a shaking hand. I unzipped the tent slowly, my hands trembling. The cold hit me first, sharp and biting, colder than it had been an hour ago. I stepped outside and swept my light across the trees. Just trees, shadows, but I felt it, that same dense quiet and something else, a smell. Like wet earth, and something rotten, like mushrooms that had been left to decay. I whispered, "Hello?" Nothing, not even an echo. I eventually climbed back in and zipped the tent shut. I didn't sleep. I just lay there until the first gray light broke through. I stumbled out, dazed, and started boiling water for coffee. That's when I saw it. Mud. 2 sets of muddy, barefoot footprints, circling the tent, overlapping, as if pacing. I stood there frozen. The prints were fresh, still wet. And I hadn't left the tent all night. I didn't think. I packed everything, shoved gear into my pack, collapsed the tent without even brushing it off. I didn't eat, didn't even refill my water bottle. I just walked, fast, constantly checking behind me. And I swear a few times I heard something keeping pace, just outside my sightline. I never saw it, but I felt it. It took me the entire day to get back to my car. When I reached the trailhead, I just stood there staring at the forest behind me. The same forest that had always felt like home. It didn't feel like that anymore. I left Yosemite that evening, drove until I hit a highway motel. I didn't sleep there either. I kept hearing my name. I checked the forums, Reddit, trail reports, ranger stations, no missing people, no sightings. No one else had reported anything strange. But I know what I heard, I know what I saw, and I know that whoever or whatever was out there, it knew my name, and it waited until I was completely alone to say it. If you ever go backpacking alone, listen to the forest. Pay attention when it goes silent. And if you hear your name spoken by something unseen, don't answer it. Just go, and don't look back. My name is Evan Cole. I'm 33 now, And what I'm about to share isn't just a strange hiking story or a spooky campfire tale. It's something that has haunted me since last fall. It started as a simple trip. I just wanted to honor my grandfather's final wish. He was the man who raised me after my parents passed when I was a kid. We were close, really close. And when he was on his deathbed, he asked me to take his ashes deep into the Black Hills of South Dakota. Before he died, my grandfather told me one thing. Bring me home to the trees, Evan. They remember better than we do. He was always a little strange, loved folklore, especially around the Black Hills. I never really got it until I got there. He'd given me GPS coordinates handwritten on a note. Not a trail, not a camp, just a point in the middle of the woods. I waited a few weeks after the funeral, mid-October, perfect weather for hiking. I drove across South Dakota and parked at a remote gravel pull-off. No other cars, no cell service, no signs, just thick forest and silence. The deeper I went, the heavier the air felt, like the trees were holding their breath. After several hours, I found the place, a quiet clearing surrounded by ancient pines. I stood there for a long time, trying to feel what he felt. I pulled out the box and knelt down, scattered the ashes slowly into the soil, whispering goodbye. As the wind picked up, I thought I heard something in it. Just for a moment, a voice, or maybe my name. I set up camp nearby. The light faded fast, swallowed by thick canopies. I made a small fire, ate a granola bar, and sat listening to the forest hum. But then, I heard it. Leaves crunching, footsteps slow, measured, too heavy for a deer. I called out, no answer, just silence. Until I heard a voice, faint, raspy, whispering. They remember. It was my grandfather's voice, his final words. I stood up, flashlight shaking in my hand, scanning the woods. But there was nothing, just the wind. Until I realized the wind was speaking. The trees were whispering in dozens of voices, some soft, some loud, all repeating what my grandfather used to say. They remember. The forest never forgets. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the fire going, just waiting for dawn. At first light, I packed up fast. I wanted to get out. But a mile down the trail, I saw something nailed to a tree. It was a photo of me, standing in that clearing, scattering the ashes. Only, I never took that photo. I was alone. The image was old-looking, printed on weathered paper, and it was dated from the day before. Panic set in. I tried retracing my steps. My GPS glitched, kept spinning in circles. The forest looked different. Same trees, but unfamiliar, like it had rearranged itself overnight. I hiked for hours, no trail, no car, just endless woods. And every so often, I'd hear the camera click. The shutter sound. Somewhere behind me. Always behind me. I began finding more photos, nailed to trees. Some of me, some of my grandfather. One showed him as a young man, standing exactly where I had stood. Same clearing, same angle, same pose. Then one photo showed us together, but we'd never been there together. I'd never gone hiking with him, yet there we were, clear as day, standing side by side. Eventually, I stumbled out onto a road. A forest ranger found me. I told him everything. He didn't even blink, just said, "You're not the first." He told me locals call that part of the Black Hills the Remembering Forest. No trails go there anymore. People hear voices, see faces and bark, lose time. It takes something from you, he said. Leave something behind in return. When I got home, I unpacked. Everything was damp and dirty. But tucked in the back of my journal was another photo. Me, sitting in front of this very microphone, recording this story. Only I haven't finished recording yet. I just found the photo this morning. I don't know what the forest took from me. Maybe a memory, maybe more. But sometimes, late at night, I hear him, my grandfather, whispering just beyond the walls. They remember, Evan, they always remember. And now, so do I. The Black Hills remember everything. Would you dare hike there alone? If you're enjoying these stories, hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe Sinister Horror Diaries for more true horror stories. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. You ever get that feeling you're being watched, even when you're alone? It starts as a twinge, a chill up your spine, and then it becomes something more. I'm not a believer in the paranormal, or at least I wasn't, until last fall. I'm a landscape photographer, and what I saw during a solo camping trip in the Smoky Mountains Well, I haven't been the same since. This is the story of the Hollow Man. It was late October. I drove out to a lesser-known stretch of the Smokies, near Tremont, off a forest road few people even notice. The air was crisp and golden leaves were falling like confetti. I was chasing fog and early morning light for my portfolio, planning to stay 2 nights by a slow, winding river tucked inside a hollow. I set up camp near the water just where the land dipped into a natural hollow, a shallow bowl surrounded by woods. It was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds seemed hesitant to sing. I chalked it up to the season. The first night was uneventful. I sat by the fire, reviewed my shots, and listened to the distant gurgle of the river. But just before bed, I saw something strange. Across the hollow, between the trees, stood a man, still as stone, not moving, just standing. I called out, "Hey, you okay?" No response. I grabbed my flashlight, but when I aimed it, he was gone, just vanished. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning, I tried to laugh it off. Probably another camper, I told myself, or just shadows playing tricks. But I couldn't shake that image. How still he was, how wrong it felt. That afternoon, I explored downstream, hoping to find a better angle of the river bend. But I kept looking over my shoulder, and each time I did, I swore the figure was there, closer than before. At one point, I looked back, and the man was standing in the riverbed, unmoving, his head slightly tilted, as if studying me. That's when I bolted. I ran back to camp, heart pounding. I packed fast, tossed my gear into the car, but I couldn't shake the feeling he was behind me. Closer, always closer when I wasn't looking. As I slammed the hatch shut, I looked up, and he was right there at the top of the hollow. Still, I didn't wait. I jumped in the car and floored it. The road twisted and narrowed. I kept checking the mirrors. No one. And then my tire hit a rock. I swerved, lost control, and crashed into a ditch. The airbag didn't go off, but my ankle twisted bad. I dragged myself out, limping. I knew I had no signal out here. I needed to hike back toward the ranger station, at least 5 miles away. I grabbed my flashlight and started walking. But the forest felt wrong now. Off balance. Every time I stopped to rest, I felt it, eyes on me. Then I heard breathing behind me. Not animal breathing, human. Too close. I turned, nothing. But when I faced forward again, he was in the path. I screamed and ran. Branches clawed at me. I stumbled. Then I hit the ground hard, face first into the dirt, and that's when I saw it. A note, pinned to a tree with my own pocket knife. I picked it up, shaking. It was my handwriting. But I hadn't written it, or had I? I didn't stop to question. I kept moving, even though my leg burned, even when I cried, even when I heard footsteps matching mine, just a second off. Just before dawn, I reached the ranger station, collapsed onto the porch. When I looked back down the trail, nothing, no one. But I knew he was still out there. They found my car, they found my tent, but not the man, not the note, just a single footprint, one I didn't leave, at the base of that hollow tree. I haven't been back since, but sometimes when I edit my photos late at night, I swear I see him, just behind a tree, just outside the frame, still watching. If you ever find yourself deep in the Smoky Mountains, don't stop, don't look back, and if you see him, run. I've hiked alone for most of my adult life. I'm not reckless. I always plan my route, carry a beacon, keep to wilderness ethics. But there's something about being alone out there in the thick of the forest that brings me peace. I've been to Colorado, Wyoming, the Rockies, and British Columbia, but none of those trails, none of those wild spaces ever left me with what Maine did. I've never told this story out loud, not really, because even now when I think back to it, I wonder if I really saw what I think I saw. But I did. And maybe if I share it, someone else will know they're not going crazy. This happened in July of 2021, a solo backpacking trip in the Maine wilderness, Baxter State Park. And it began with a cradle, a wooden cradle, sitting by itself in the woods, and it ended with something crawling toward me on all fours in the dark. I had been planning the trip for months. I mapped out a route that veered off the major trails toward a series of glacial ponds tucked deep in the northern part of Baxter. Most people stick to the Appalachian Trail section or the routes near Mount Katahdin, But I wanted isolation. The kind of silence where the only thing you hear is the wind in the needles and the call of distant loons. No cars, no voices, no signal. Just me, the trees, and the trail. The first day was uneventful. I made good progress, set up camp near a low ridge, and slept like a rock. But on day 2, things started to feel off. There wasn't anything obvious, no sound, no movement, just a shift in the air like the forest had noticed me. You ever get that feeling like something's behind you, but when you turn, it's just empty space? That's what I felt for hours that day. I kept looking over my shoulder, tuning into every twig snap, every shift in the underbrush. I told myself it was deer, maybe a fox, but the feeling didn't go away. In fact, it got worse the deeper I went. By late afternoon, the trail gave way to a narrow game path. I was making my way between 2 ridges when I saw it. It was like the forest opened up around me, a clearing maybe 30 feet across, perfectly circular. No tree stumps, no signs of logging, just flat ground covered in soft moss and pine needles. And right in the center of that clearing, a cradle. A wooden cradle, old and gray with rot, like it had been sitting there for decades. It didn't make sense. There were no cabins nearby, no structures, no old foundations. I hadn't passed any trails branching off. It was just there, like the forest had grown around it. I approached it like it might bite. There were strange carvings etched into the wood, swirling patterns, symbols I didn't recognize. I reached out and touched it. It was warm. I didn't want to camp too close to it, but I was tired. I set up my tent about 50 yards away, near a rise in the forest floor. As the sun went down, the clearing just sat there, empty. Still, the cradle didn't move. Around 2 a.m. I heard it, a sound like something brushing against the nylon of my tent, a dragging sound, wet leaves being disturbed. I sat up, heart racing, but there was nothing out there, just that deep, unnatural silence. In the morning, I went to check the cradle. It had moved, not far, just slightly turned like it had been rocked. I told myself it was animals, the wind, anything but what it felt like. That night, I woke up to the sound of a baby crying, not far, just outside my tent. I froze. The sound was raw, wet, like a newborn struggling for breath. I knew there shouldn't be anyone out there. I unzipped the tent and stepped into the night. The crying stopped. I turned my head. The cradle was rocking hard, like something had just left it. Then I heard it, a wet, slapping sound behind me. Something was crawling toward me on all fours, fast. I turned. I will never forget what I saw. Pale skin, black eyes, elongated limbs. It wasn't a person. It wasn't anything human. I ran. I didn't grab my pack. I didn't look back. I ran through the woods like a deer being hunted. I ran until morning light broke through the canopy, and I never, ever went back. I filed a report with the rangers. They found my gear, my tent, even the fire pit, but no cradle, no tracks, nothing. Just a clearing like any other. I haven't hiked solo since, but sometimes I still hear that crying when I close my eyes. If you ever find a cradle in the woods, don't touch it, don't camp near it, and whatever you do, don't answer the crying. I've always found peace in the silence of the woods. That's why I decided to spend a week alone camping in northern Ontario. No phone reception, no people, no noise, just me and the forest. I parked my Jeep at a remote trailhead off Highway 129 and hiked 3 hours in, far from any marked campgrounds. It was perfect, or so I thought. I set up camp beside a small creek. My tent was nestled between 2 spruce trees, and I had a small fire pit ready to go. That first night, the wind whispered through the trees, and I felt a strange weight in the air, like the forest was watching. Still, I told myself it was just nerves. The next morning while exploring, I noticed something odd. A trail marked with red ribbons tied to tree branches. It wasn't on my topo map, and I hadn't seen any mention of it online. Curiosity got the better of me. I followed it, assuming it was just a forgotten route used by hunters or backwoods hikers. I kept walking for what felt like an hour, then 2. The red markers continued endlessly. I checked my GPS, but the screen froze. No signal. The compass app kept spinning, confused. I turned around, or thought I did, but the trail just kept looping back. The trees started looking the same, the forest more silent than before. There were no sounds, not a single bird, no rustling leaves, just complete, unnatural silence. The air felt heavier. I suddenly realized I couldn't tell which direction I'd come from. The trail felt like it was folding in on itself. I started to panic and jogged ahead, hoping it would lead me back. I swear I passed the same fallen log 3 times, a twisted birch tree with a lightning scar 4 times. The trail was looping. I stopped and shouted, not for help, but just to hear something. My own voice sounded distant, like it was swallowed by the forest. That's when I knew I wasn't just lost. Something was wrong with this place. Eventually, I found a break in the trees that looked familiar. I rushed toward it, heart racing. Relief flooded me as I saw my campsite clearing, but something was wrong. I stepped in and everything was gone. My tent? Gone. My gear? Gone. My food bag, my sleeping pad, even the bear hang, all missing. It looked like no one had ever camped there. No animal tracks, no theft signs, just absence. My stomach dropped. I was alone, truly alone, and something had wiped my presence away. That's when I saw it, carved into the bark of the spruce tree I'd tied my food bag to. A message, etched deep into the wood. You weren't supposed to see this trail. The letters were uneven, raw, like they were scratched by a blade in a hurry, or desperation. I backed away, heart pounding. Something watched me, I could feel it. Not from behind a tree or the shadows, but from the forest itself. Like the woods were alive and conscious. I grabbed the only thing left, my knife, and ran. The forest shifted. I swear the trail wasn't where it had been before. I stumbled through brush, thorns tearing at my legs. I heard twigs snapping, but no footsteps. The forest echoed with something that wasn't quite sound, like a presence brushing against the edges of reality. After what felt like hours of running blindly, I burst onto a logging road, unfamiliar but real. I collapsed on the gravel, shaking. The forest edge looked darker than it should have, like the trees didn't want to let me go. I followed the road until I reached a ranger's outpost, empty. I used the radio to call for help. When the authorities found me, they asked where my camp was. I gave them coordinates. We went back, and what they found didn't make sense. The clearing was there, but untouched. No footprints, no fire pit, not even disturbed soil. It was like no one had ever set foot there, like I had dreamed it all. Except I still had my knife, and my boots were torn from running. That trail wasn't supposed to be found. If you ever hike alone in northern Ontario, stick to your map. If you see red ribbons on a trail that shouldn't exist, turn around. Don't follow it. Don't trust your GPS. And if you do go in, pray you don't see the tree. Because if you do, it already knows you're there. They say the forests of Washington have a way of watching you. Even when you're alone, the trees feel sentient, alive. I've hunted these woods for years. I know the trails, the animal patterns, the seasons. But what happened last fall during elk season, I still haven't wrapped my head around it. I haven't stepped into the woods since. I set out before dawn, like always. Rifle slung over my shoulder, coffee in my thermos, and a half-eaten protein bar in my pocket. It was cold, that kind of sharp, dry cold that makes your breath feel like smoke. I'd hiked about a mile past the main trail when I spotted fresh tracks. Elk, big one too. I moved slowly, stalking, my boots crunching lightly over twigs. That's when I saw it. A massive elk about 40 yards away, its body half obscured by brush. It wasn't moving like a normal elk, no grazing, no twitching ears. It just stood there, still, almost posed. I raised my rifle, lined up the shot, but the moment my finger touched the trigger, the elk turned its head and looked right at me. Those eyes weren't right. They weren't animal. They were human. I froze, rifle shaking. My heart was pounding like a war drum. Then, without a sound, it backed into the trees and vanished. No rustling, no snapped twigs, just gone. I made camp early that day. My nerves were shot. I found a small clearing near a creek and pitched my tent, built a fire, made some dehydrated stew. I told myself I imagined it, that my mind was playing tricks. I even laughed about it a little, until the sun went down. The night was eerily still. No wind, no crickets, just the crackle of the fire. Around 11 p.m. I heard it, soft elk calls echoing from the tree line. Long, drawn-out bugles, but off. Too slow, too deliberate, like someone imitating an elk and doing a poor job of it. I sat frozen, straining my ears. That's when I heard it, a whisper, not close, but not far either. "I see you." It was my voice, exactly, whispered back at me from the woods. I grabbed my flashlight and rifle, swept the beam into the trees. Nothing, but I felt it. Something was watching me, from just beyond where the light reached. I didn't sleep a second that night. Just sat there with my rifle aimed at the dark. At first light, I packed up and left. I didn't care about the hunt anymore. I didn't even care that I left my coffee pot by the fire. I just wanted out. And as I walked, I swear, I heard that voice one last time, whispered from behind me, soft as wind. "I see you." Back home, I thought maybe I'd forget. Maybe it was a hallucination, too much caffeine, too little sleep. But I started hearing things. Elk calls, at night, from outside my window. Then a few nights ago, just before I fell asleep, I heard it again. "I see you." In my voice, whispered from the inside of my closet. Something followed me home from those woods. I don't know what it is or what it wants, but I haven't gone back, and I never will. So if you ever find yourself deep in the forests of Washington and you see an elk staring at you, look closely. If the eyes are human, run. There are places so deep in the wild that it feels like the land forgot time. No roads, no cell towers, just silence, trees, and whatever else has always lived there, long before we came along. Last summer I found one of those places in the Montana backcountry. I was alone, just me and my dog. What I found out there, it wasn't natural. And whatever it was, it took something from me, something I'll never get back. It started like any other solo camping trip. I was somewhere deep in the Montana wilderness, off trail, beyond the last Forest Service road, miles from anything resembling a town. It was the kind of place where your cell signal dies and your instincts take over. I brought my dog, Diesel, 90 pounds of German Shepherd loyalty. It was supposed to be a weekend of quiet, solitude, maybe some fishing, but that's not what I got. That first day, Diesel and I wandered deeper into the woods, following an old animal trail. There was something serene about it until I noticed how quiet it had gotten. No birds, no insects, just the sound of our own movement. Then I saw it. The tree. Massive, old, and completely stripped of its bark, every inch like it had been skinned. The bark lay in curled, brittle strips at its base. Around it were piles of bones, mostly animals, I think. But one pile, that one looked too clean, too human. Diesel's hackles were up. He growled low and steady, circling the tree, never taking his eyes off the surrounding woods. I called him, but he wouldn't come. Just growled, low and guttural, like he sensed something I couldn't. I got chills down my spine. We left quickly, and I didn't mark the spot. Some part of me didn't want to find it again. That night, something felt wrong. Diesel sat rigid at the edge of our campsite, staring into the dark woods. He didn't eat, didn't lie down, just watched. I couldn't see anything out there, but the silence was unnatural. No crickets, no wind, not even the creek. Just this dead stillness, like the forest was holding its breath. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, Diesel started barking. Not his usual bark. This was panicked, feral. I grabbed my flashlight and unzipped the tent, but the second I stepped out, he stopped. No bark, no sound, just trees, and a wide open silence that felt too big. I called for him, but he didn't come back. Not that night. Not ever. At dawn, I searched. I called his name over and over. Nothing. No prints. No blood. Just gone. I checked for signs of struggle, but the ground was undisturbed. The only new thing? Another tree. About 50 feet from our tent. Huge, older than the others, and stripped completely bare of its bark, just like the first one. Its exposed wood glistened slightly in the morning sun, almost wet-looking. But the weirdest part? There was no bark around its base. It was just gone. I didn't pack up. I ran, just grabbed what I could and sprinted back toward the truck. I didn't stop to rest. I didn't eat. I didn't care. All I could think about was how a 100-pound dog vanished without a sound, and how those trees, those flayed trees, were multiplying. I made it to the truck. I drove without stopping, without looking back. Every time I glanced in the rearview mirror, I half expected to see that pale barkless wood standing in the middle of the road. I didn't feel safe until I was back in town. And even then, it didn't feel far enough. I filed a missing pet report, talked to some local rangers. They shrugged it off, mountain lions, they said. But when I described the tree, the way it looked like it had been peeled, the bones, that's when one of the rangers got quiet, real quiet. He said, "If you saw something like that, you did the right thing by leaving." I asked him what he meant, but he wouldn't say more. Just looked out the window and muttered, "Some trees aren't meant to be touched." I don't go camping anymore. I think about Diesel every day. But more than that, I think about those trees and how sometimes when I close my eyes, I swear I can still hear the sound of bark peeling, wet, slow, like skin coming off. If you ever find a tree like that, bare, pale, wrong, don't get close, don't take pictures, don't even look too long, just turn around and run. I almost didn't make it out of the woods that night. I found shelter in a place that shouldn't have been there. A tidy little cabin, warm and lit as if someone had just left the room. By morning, I'd hiked out and told a ranger. He looked at me like I'd lost my mind, then pointed at an old clipping on his wall. The cabin had burned down decades earlier, with a family trapped inside. That's when the air went cold. It was a weekday off work. I wanted nothing more than a long, stupidly optimistic hike with a little solitude. It was June, the trails were late green, and I'd packed light. Canvas map folded in my pocket, a sticky paper trail map at the trailhead, a heavy nylon pack stuffed with a sleeping bag, a thermos of coffee from a diner, and a cassette tape for the drive. The morning started easy. I parked at a lot with cracked asphalt, tightened my boots, and walked in under a blue sky that felt endless. The ridge trail was narrow, rocky in places, threaded between birch and hemlock. I was humming under my breath, the kind of carefree that makes you forget the small, useful fears. 3 hours in, clouds rolled in fast, not the slow, cinematic kind, but a wall of gray that knocked the sky flat. The first raindrops were small and polite. Half an hour later, the wind had teeth. The trail turned slick, and the exposed ridge felt suddenly like a place that wanted you gone. I kept going because turning back felt worse. I figured I'd find a lean-to or a wide rock overhang. I didn't. Then through a gap in the trees, a rectangle of orange light. At first I thought it was a campsite lantern, but as I pushed through the last scrub, I saw the whole thing. A small log cabin in a clearing, smoke drifting thin from the chimney, a warm glow through curtained windows. It looked lived in. My boots squelched as I stumbled toward the porch like a lunatic finally finding a rescue. Inside was quiet and warm. Everything was impossibly neat. A braided rug lay perfectly centered. A small table held 2 mugs and a single plate with crumbs. A rocking chair by the stove had an Afghan folded over it. The smell, clean smoke, a faint sweetness, boiled tea. It hit me in the chest and made me dizzy with gratitude. The cabin felt like a snapshot preserved. A half-read paperback on a windowsill, a child's wooden toy horse tucked under a chair, neatly folded shirts in a wardrobe. I set my pack by the door and found a small calendar nailed behind it. July, but the year was smudged beyond recognition. None of it made sense. The kettle sang. I told myself to relax. Eventually, I laid down and fell into a sleep that wasn't restful. I woke once to the sound of the front door closing gently, as if someone had come in and left again. My pack was where I'd left it. The fire was still low, and the mugs were untouched. I woke to thin, brilliant light. The storm had passed. Everything smelled like wet pine and something sweeter, charred wood maybe? I packed slowly, almost afraid to disturb the perfection of the interior. 2 hours later, I was at the ranger station. I told the ranger the whole story, the storm, the warm cabin, the kettle, the pictures. He listened, quiet at first. Then he pointed to a bulletin board pinned with old newspaper clippings. One headline jumped out, "Family Perishes in Cabin Blaze, 1948. He told me the coordinates for a foundation down the ridge where the cabin had stood, burned beyond repair, family buried, the site left as a memorial. He said no one had lived there for decades. I asked him if maybe someone had rebuilt there. He shook his head politely. "Not that place," he said. Sometimes people see things out in those woods. Fires leave ghosts. I still don't know what I saw that night. A mercy, a memory, or something that shouldn't have been able to reach me across decades. All I know is the rasp of that wooden stove, the way the mug warmed my hands, and the ranger's face when he pointed to that clipping. I tell you this because sometimes the woods keep stories waiting, and sometimes they give them back. Thanks for watching Sinister Horror Diaries. Stay safe, stay scared, stay sinister. And if you're brave enough for more, choose one of the videos on your screen and follow me back into the darkness.